First story, when Ellie and I first crossed paths during our college days, there was a magical connection between us. It was like finding a missing puzzle piece, and soon enough, we found ourselves stepping into the world of dating. Back then, I wasn't the most self-assured person. However, Ellie's genuine interest in me cast a positive light on my self-perception. As a nerdy guy who toiled hard but struggled in the realm of romantic pursuits, Ellie's intelligence and beauty expressing interest in me left me feeling both amazed and appreciative. Driven by shared ambitions and lofty dreams, we diligently worked towards our goals throughout our college years. By the time we tossed our graduation caps into the air, we had each carved out our paths as entrepreneurs, establishing our own small businesses. Post-graduation, we decided to take the plunge into cohabitation, and a year later, we sealed our commitment with the vows of marriage. Our union felt robust and enduring, weathering challenges ranging from family tragedies to professional setbacks and the natural ebb and flow of disagreements. It was my firm belief that overcoming these adversities only fortified the bonds that held us together. Ellie, with her extensive social circle that included many male friends, never triggered any insecurities in me. Her actions were always above board, and my trust in her was unwavering. Social gatherings were innocent, comprising a mix of friends, and I extended my trust to her inner circle as well. Approaching our significant 10-year milestone, I felt it was an opportune moment to broach the topic of starting a family, a subject we had previously compromised on in our relationship. My desire for children clashed with Ellie's reluctance, and after much deliberation, we settled on the decision to have just one child. However, approximately 3 months ago, the tides began to turn. Ellie conveyed her intention to go out with friends to unwind from the stress induced by my persistent mention of expanding our family. That evening, she returned home at an unusual hour, 4 a.m., and from that point onwards, our once vibrant bedroom became a dormant space in our relationship. Ellie had consistently been the initiator of closeness between us, even during times of physical separation due to travel. The sudden shift in her behavior, increased social outings, guarded phone protection, and avoidance of our usual connection, raised unprecedented concerns for me. This was a side of Ellie I had never encountered before. After enduring 3 to 4 weeks of this emotional turmoil, I confided in my closest friend, Omar. He directed me to Reddit, where I immersed myself in narratives of individuals experiencing similar situations. The revelation prompted me to confront the issue head-on, as the impact on my mood became increasingly evident. While my inclination was always to trust Ellie wholeheartedly, the circumstances now compelled me to approach that trust with a newfound reluctance. It was a tough call, but I felt I had to peek at Ellie's phone, checking her calls and texts. I felt like a real jerk for snooping, but what I found was jaw-dropping. Turns out, one of the new people in her circle was an old flame from high school, from way before we even got together. The deeper I dug, the more I uncovered. It seemed that because I trusted her completely, she got sloppy about hiding the affair. About a month back, at a party he attended, they spent the whole night chatting and ended up locking lips, right in front of everyone. They even slipped away to the bathroom together, leaving no doubts about what they were up to. Until that moment, I'd been wrestling with anxiety, trying to cling to the image of the woman I thought I married, sort of deceiving myself. But after that, anger and sorrow flooded over me. And Ellie seemed clueless about my sudden change. She didn't seem to notice that I stopped being affectionate, and inside, I felt like I was falling apart. A month ago, I decided to catch them in the act. I told Ellie I was heading out to visit my cousin for the weekend, who lives far away. Instead, I bunked with Omar, who had been my rock through this mess. When Ellie brought the guy home and into our bed, I crept in and caught them in the act. The sounds left no room for doubt. It felt like something snapped inside me. I felt like my soul was being torn apart. My whole body went cold, and it felt like a ton of bricks crushing my chest. I couldn't even breathe. I felt numb. The next part is kind of fuzzy, to be honest. According to Omar, who witnessed it all, it seems I confronted them, yanked the guy off the bed, and Omar had to pull me away from him. I vaguely remember Omar pinning me down. It's been a rough ride since then. I've been trying to wrap my head around it all and figure out what to do next. It's hard to believe that the person I loved and trusted could hurt me like this. I'm really thankful to Omar for standing by me and helping me through this. Right now, I'm just trying to take it one day at a time and heal from this excruciating pain. After the dust settled from getting caught, I decided to cut off all contact with Ellie for 5 weeks. During that time, I worked closely with a lawyer, bracing myself for the worst. It was an uphill battle for me, emotionally and mentally. Omar acted as an intermediary between Ellie and me because I couldn't bring myself to talk to her directly. Surprisingly, even though we weren't speaking, Ellie reached out to my family, sharing our relationship woes. That just added another layer of complexity to an already tangled situation. After the 5 weeks passed, Ellie and I finally sat down and had a heart-to-heart. She expressed remorse and owned up to her actions, admitting it wasn't my fault. We both agreed to give marriage counseling a shot, hoping it could help mend our broken relationship. Despite the pain and confusion, I still harbored deep feelings for Ellie. But it was hard to know what to believe. Had she cheated on me before, and I just didn't catch on? Or did I turn a blind eye to the signs because I trusted her too much? These doubts swirled around in my mind as I grappled with this difficult chapter of my life. Update: after reading through all the responses and messages, I took the whole weekend to really think things over. It was a lot to process, but eventually I came to a decision. I realized that staying with Ellie just wasn't something I could do anymore. Trying to work through our problems would mean sacrificing my self-respect, and that was a line I couldn't cross. Plus, I didn't want to be in a relationship where I was always on edge, wondering if I was being betrayed. So after careful thought, I knew it was time to call it quits. The next Monday began in an unexpected way. I woke up to a surprising sight. My body was reacting in a way it hadn't since I found out about Ellie's affair. It was almost like my body was telling me it was time to close this chapter and move forward. It was almost funny in a strange way. When Omar and his wife came to check on me, they thought I was having some kind of breakdown. Once I got myself together, I phoned Ellie's dad to arrange a meeting. We agreed to meet an hour before our scheduled marriage counseling session. As I drove to meet him, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. He's a good man, easygoing, funny, and sensible. Sitting across from him at a cozy breakfast spot near his place, I expressed my gratitude for how he and his wife had treated me over the years. I also apologized for having to have such a tough conversation with him. As I explained my decision to divorce his daughter, I could see his disappointment and anger, not aimed at me, but at Ellie. He listened patiently, and when I asked him to keep our talk confidential from Ellie, he agreed. We shook hands, and he wished me well as we parted ways. It was tough knowing I had shattered his image of his daughter, but I reminded myself that it wasn't my job to take care of her anymore. She's a grown woman now. Following that conversation, it was time for our marriage counseling session. I had spent all of Sunday practicing what I would say to Ellie and how I would say it, making sure that my emotions wouldn't get the best of me during our conversation. As we sat down for the session, I couldn't help but notice that Ellie was wearing one of the dresses I used to love seeing her in. For a brief moment, I almost forgot about everything that had happened, but then the feelings of disgust and anger came rushing back. I let the counselor begin, but after about 10 minutes, I felt compelled to interrupt. I had a few things that I needed to say to Ellie, and I wanted to say them there, with a neutral third party present. I made it clear that if I was interrupted at any point, I would simply leave the session. I started by expressing my realizations to Ellie, stating that the details of her affair no longer mattered to me. What mattered was that she had cheated. I confronted her about not wanting to have children with me and how she was planning to string me along. When Ellie tried to interject, I walked towards the door, prompting her to back off. I made it clear that divorce papers were already being filed, and her father now knew the truth about what had been happening. Our only communication from then on would be through our lawyers. With that, I left. As soon as I closed the door behind me, I heard Ellie wailing loudly. She rushed out of the office, apologizing and begging for a second chance, saying that we could start a family. She was crying hysterically, pleading with me. Despite the emotional turmoil I was experiencing, I managed to push past her and get into my car. The floodgates of emotions that I had been holding back started to overwhelm me as I drove to my parents' house, where I sent the planned text message to Ellie's best friend's husbands. When I got home, Dad was out at the store, but Mom could sense something was off with me. She's always had a way of understanding me without words. I told both Mom and Dad that I needed to talk about something important. So we sat down and waited for Dad to return, which took about 30 minutes. When Dad finally arrived, I poured out everything that had been weighing on my mind. With each word, it felt like I was releasing a flood of emotions, and all the pain inside me was pouring out. When I finished speaking, Dad simply held me, and I cried into his shirt for a solid 20 minutes. Once it was all over, I felt drained but also strangely at peace. As a token of appreciation for Omar, who has been more than just a friend to me, I've arranged for him to receive a Harley-Davidson motorcycle he's had his eye on for a while. I can't wait to see the look on his face when he gets it. I believe this will be my final post, as it marks the end of this chapter in my life. I want to express my gratitude to all of you. I never expected to find such wise and supportive advice from strangers on the internet. I know there's a challenging road ahead, and I'll continue seeking individual counseling to navigate through the aftermath of this situation and rebuild my ability to trust. But I have hope that with time and effort, the pain, sadness, and anger will fade away, leaving room for a brighter future. I'm genuinely looking forward to what lies ahead. Second story, my wife and I have been married for 12 years now. We met each other back in college, a solid 16 years ago. We've come a long way together, having a beautiful 6-year-old child and recently celebrating the achievement of buying our very first house. But like any journey, ours has had its share of highs and lows. Despite the challenges, we've managed to weather the storms and keep our relationship intact. But lately, things have been feeling off kilter, and I find myself questioning when exactly D-Day, or the day I discovered something wasn't right, truly began. Was it months ago when I first noticed my wife acting a bit secretive with her phone? Or perhaps it was more recent, like last week, last night, or even today. It all began innocuously enough, as these things often do. Late one night, I couldn't help but notice my wife engrossed in her phone, typing away with fervor. It struck me as odd because she'd been unusually guarded about her phone lately. Caught in a moment of curiosity while she was occupied in the shower, I took a peek. What I discovered rattled me to the core. She was engaged in open flirtation with a colleague named Jack Harkness. Confronting her about it, she swiftly grew defensive, brushing off my concerns and insisting it was merely harmless banter between coworkers. She even accused me of invading her privacy by snooping, leaving me feeling guilty for simply wanting to understand. A week passed, and the unease lingered like a persistent shadow. One morning, as my wife readied herself for the day, her phone buzzed with a message notification from Jack at an ungodly hour. Knowing confronting her in front of our child wasn't ideal, I opted to bide my time. Confrontation isn't exactly my forte, and I found solace in confiding my worries to my therapist later that day. Their advice was straightforward: confront her and ask to see her phone. Armed with this counsel, I broached the subject upon her return, only to be met with staunch resistance. She vehemently asserted her right to privacy, refusing to yield her device. When pressed about her interactions with Jack, she downplayed their frequency, insisting it was just a couple of messages. Skepticism gnawing at me, I persisted, eventually coaxing her into revealing the truth. It turned out there were far more exchanges than she initially let on, leaving me grappling with a cocktail of emotions: anger, hurt, and betrayal. Despite agreeing to seek counseling, my wife's sudden aversion to our therapist spelled the premature demise of our therapeutic efforts. Perhaps D-Day came knocking once again last week. A morning spent observing my wife engrossed in animated conversation with her friends via text only served to fan the flames of suspicion. And when an opportune moment presented itself, I couldn't resist the temptation to delve into her phone once more. Discovering ongoing communication with Jack, albeit under a slightly altered moniker, left me reeling with uncertainty. Confronting her yielded little solace. She defended their exchanges as harmless camaraderie, emphasizing my lack of explicit prohibition against communication with Jack due to their professional ties. The absence of any explicit request to peruse their exchanges further left me questioning the efficacy of such a demand at this juncture. Or maybe, just maybe, D-Day unfolded its grim banner last night. An air of unease permeated the atmosphere, my wife visibly withdrawn and distant. A sleepless night spent grappling with the demons of suspicion and doubt culminated in a moment of reckoning. In the dead of night, as my wife lay sound asleep, I stole a fleeting glance at her phone. Heart pounding with trepidation, fingers trembling with uncertainty, I attempted to bypass the device's security measures. A failed attempt at entering her newfound PIN served as an ominous reminder of the chasm widening between us. Retreating to the solitude of the couch, I found myself engulfed in a maelstrom of conflicting emotions: shame, guilt, fear, and a gnawing sense of foreboding. Morning brought little respite as I grappled with the monumental decision looming on the horizon. And now, today dawns with a sense of inevitability, a looming specter of confrontation looming on the horizon. Emotionally drained and physically exhausted, I find myself teetering on the precipice of uncertainty, unsure of how to navigate the tumultuous waters ahead. The slow drip of half-truths and deceit has left me adrift in a sea of paranoia, my senses dulled by the constant barrage of uncertainty. As the clock ticks inexorably forward, I steel myself for the inevitable reckoning that awaits. Confrontation may not be my forte, but the time for silence has long since passed. In the crucible of truth, I seek redemption, closure, and the faint glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. Update: recently, I had a serious talk with my wife, letting her know I'm thinking about getting a divorce. It's not an easy decision, but things have been tough between us. Instead of understanding my feelings, she downplayed her connection with a CO worker, saying it's silly to consider divorce over that. She even offered to show me their text messages, but I couldn't fully trust that I'd see everything. Nowadays, deleting messages is easy, especially if they're not standard texts from the phone company. The messages I did manage to see weren't overly scandalous, but they were definitely not okay. She texted this CO worker a bunch of times, and he kept flirting, even over seemingly innocent stuff. For example, on Thanksgiving Day, she texted him about cooking turkey, and he responded with something flirty. Another time, about a week ago, she messaged him close to bedtime, talking about having another drink because it had been a long day, and he responded in a way that made me uncomfortable. I'm in a tough spot. There's some evidence of her doing things that aren't right, and she's been hiding this relationship while also making me doubt my own judgment. But what I saw isn't clear proof. The text suggests something off, but they're not totally explicit, and they don't completely add up in the given context. Even though she kept begging me to change my mind, I stuck to my decision. Despite all her appeals, I stayed firm. Eventually, she asked me to do just 2 counseling sessions. I gave in and agreed to those sessions, but I made it clear that if they don't convince me we can save our marriage, I'm going ahead with the divorce. Update: after my wife insisted on counseling, I agreed, mainly because I needed time to think about what to do next. In the meantime, I've been active on this subreddit, helping others and trying to sort out my own thoughts. Despite the tension between us, she acts like everything is normal, being affectionate and wanting to cuddle all the time. But I'm frustrated and have been turning down her advances. In our arguments about the issue, I brought up my worries about her maybe cheating, pointing out the lies, deleted messages, and how she's treating her friendship with this person as super private. She got upset, feeling hurt and not understanding why I can't trust her. She cried, saying she doesn't deserve to be treated like this. Since I don't have solid proof of more than an emotional affair, I decided to give her a chance to come clean and work on fixing things. I laid out 2 simple conditions for me to even think about staying and working with the marriage counselor. She has to stop talking to the other person involved in this mess, and she must let me see all the messages between her and him. At first, she agreed to both. But she changed her mind. She keeps texting him, calling it friendly banter, but she won't let me see the messages or anything else on her phone. On Friday, I got in touch with the divorce lawyer, and I have a meeting set for the end of the month. I was hoping to find evidence of more than just flirty texts because, where I live, fault matters during separation, and that could be useful. I'm also thinking about talking to the other person's spouse. I don't have solid proof of anything inappropriate between my wife and her coworker, but it seems they're crossing lines, and maybe it's worth bringing it up. Ultimately, I feel like this marriage is beyond fixing, and I'm ready to move on. Update: in the latest update, I received some advice suggesting that I should be more straightforward with my spouse regarding our situation. It's been a tough decision, but I've taken steps toward divorce with the guidance of a lawyer. Alongside this, I decided to reach out to the spouse of my wife's affair partner, disclosing only the facts that I'm certain about. My intention was to allow her to form her own conclusions without creating any potential legal issues. Surprisingly, the response from the other spouse was quite positive. She took the matter seriously and expressed genuine concern for my situation. She admitted feeling uncertain about how to handle the situation, but assured me that she would discuss it with her husband. I wished her well in dealing with the situation. However, My wife eventually found out about this and reacted with anger. She accused me of being responsible for ruining their marriage, destroying her friendship, and even jeopardizing her job. She expressed deep distress, claiming she no longer recognized the person I had become, and voiced serious concerns about my mental well-being. Throughout this ordeal, I made a conscious effort to remain composed and adhered to the Divorce 180 approach, maintaining that while I understood her anger, there was nothing further to discuss. I acknowledged my actions and emphasized that the past could not be changed. In the aftermath, my wife returned from work in tears, revealing that rumors were circulating at her workplace. Surprisingly, she held me accountable for these rumors, despite my lack of involvement in discussing our situation with anyone from her workplace. I deduced that if such rumors existed, they likely stemmed from the affair partner. Consequently, I reasoned that my wife's grievances should be directed towards him. She also disclosed that she had conversed with the affair partner, and they had decided to reconcile their marriage. In addition, she requested that I refrain from further communication with the affair partner's spouse. As we are now firmly committed to pursuing a divorce, my wife's demeanor has become increasingly hostile and vindictive. She resorts to name-calling and accuses me of various shortcomings, including laziness, apathy, and deceit. Moreover, she asserts that she was the sole contributor to our marriage's well-being, making me feel culpable for purportedly ending the affair partner's marriage, despite her earlier contradictions. In response to the evolving situation, the affair partner's spouse sent me a final message, expressing understanding and solidarity. She emphasized that given the circumstances, my actions were justifiable and no apology was necessary. I resolved to preserve these messages as evidence for my divorce proceedings. Overall, I believe I have managed the situation reasonably well, with my wife's true disposition becoming increasingly evident, thereby reinforcing my determination to proceed with the divorce. Rather than expending my energy on futile attempts to placate my spouse, I am redirecting my focus towards nurturing a stronger bond with my son, which has proven to be immensely rewarding. I find myself mentally drained from the continuous deceit and denial. While the prospect of spending the upcoming holiday season with a resentful spouse does not evoke enthusiasm, I am cognizant that this phase shall eventually pass. Since my last update, the circumstances have been fraught with tumult and disorder. For those grappling with emotionally taxing relationships, I recommend perusing the article Mind Duck Has 3 Stations. Today has been particularly tumultuous, with my wife experiencing fluctuating emotions. Her sentiments ranged from begrudging acceptance of the impending divorce while holding me accountable, to proposing cohabitation post-divorce for the sake of our child, to imploring me to reconsider the divorce, and finally reverting to the narrative of being the sole contributor to our marital endeavors. Additionally, she expressed apprehension regarding the financial implications of our separation. It has indeed been a lot to process in a single day. Update: a few weeks ago, I told my wife I wanted a divorce, and I stand by that decision. We have a 6-year-old son, and now I'm looking into co-parenting to make sure I'm there for him. Despite my firm stance, my wife keeps asking me to reconsider, suggesting there might be something worth saving in our marriage. She's accused me of selfishly tearing our family apart. However, recently, she proposed a different idea. She suggested I reconsider the divorce not to reconcile our relationship, but to raise our son together while still living in the same house. She called it a parenting marriage. I have reservations about this idea. I'm worried it could lead to financial complications down the line once we eventually get divorced. Also, if I were to start a new relationship, it might be awkward for someone new to have me living with my ex-spouse, even if it's just for co-parenting. Additionally, I fear this arrangement might not give me the level of independence I desire in my life and in caring for our son. Our past issues regarding parenting and communication won't magically disappear just because we label ourselves as divorced. I'd appreciate any thoughts on this matter. So far, I've only found articles from marriage counselors praising the parenting marriage technique, and I haven't come across any downsides mentioned. Every day, my wife keeps begging me to reconsider. I've been distant and unresponsive because some of her behavior has been terrible. She even came up to me holding our family photo from last Christmas, asking, "Isn't this worth it?" But it's important to note that she hasn't apologized for her actions. According to her, she did nothing wrong. Still, I'm trying to remain emotionally detached. She's been ignoring my request to go to mediation for the separation agreement or let my lawyer handle it. In our state, there are two paths to divorce, through a separation agreement or living apart for 1 year. We're still living together because I'm the one paying the mortgage. Today, she told me she'll sign the separation agreement, but on the condition that I allow her to tell our son that I am the one responsible for the divorce. I don't think that kind of condition can even be part of the agreement. Isn't this a manipulative move on her part? What should I do now? Our first talk about divorce was in June. I expressed my desire to end the marriage, but she asked for time to reconsider. After more evidence of her behavior came to light, I had the second talk right after Thanksgiving, making it clear that I'm done and want a divorce. I reached out to a lawyer, and so did she. However, the divorce process has now stalled in Maryland without a separation agreement. The only option for divorce is to live apart for 1 year. On Monday, my wife dropped a bombshell on me. She insisted on a separation agreement, but with the condition that I tell our 7-year-old son that I wanted to leave and wasn't willing to fix things. I told her it wasn't appropriate to have that conversation with him. Last night, we talked again. She now says she'll agree to the separation agreement only if we go to 3 months of couples therapy because she needs to know the why of the divorce. I've been clear about what went wrong, including the lying and emotional affair. However, she doesn't think those are good enough reasons. I've also been discussing with my individual therapist the patterns of offense in our relationship, and honestly, there's no chance of me returning to this marriage. I suggested a compromise, agreeing to couples counseling after the agreement is in place. I thought it would give her closure. I need the security of the document first, so I can freely express myself in therapy without her manipulating the process. She called this unfair, believing that the money spent on drafting the agreement could be used for therapy to save the marriage. Do I need to leave now? The original plan was for me to keep the house since I can afford the mortgage. I'm considering moving to an apartment in my son's school district and offering to pay half of the bills on the current house until we can sell it, if it comes to that. My soon-to-be ex-wife and I are going through a separation. She's been dragging her feet on working out a separation agreement, saying she needs more time to think. It's been over 6 months now, and while she's been focused on reconciling, I've been hoping she'd change her mind. My lawyer pushed me to take action recently. We have a school-aged child, which makes things more complicated. We own a home we bought 2 years ago, with both of us on the title, but I'm the only one on the mortgage. I cover the mortgage and all household bills, while she earns a 6-figure salary but only pays for groceries and health care. With the estimated child support, I won't be able to afford the mortgage and save enough. So I've started looking at apartments and reached out to a realtor. However, I can't move out until we have a signed separation agreement with a custody plan. I want to start selling the home, but she refuses to sell it right now because she's not ready to leave. Yesterday, she wanted to discuss the finances of me keeping the house after separation. She wanted to review my income and the mortgage to explore options, but I declined, stating she has no right to dictate my living arrangements post-separation. This made her cry, claiming she's doing what's best for our child. I feel stuck. I can't leave, I can't stay, and I can't sell the house. I spoke to my lawyer, and she'll prepare a separation agreement. But if my wife refuses to sign, I'm uncertain about my next steps. The situation with my soon-to-be ex-wife is still ongoing. I can't move out until I have a signed custody agreement. My plan is to leave in March. On Sunday night, my wife installed security cameras inside the house that record 24/7 to an external device. I noticed them on Monday and put them away. She reinstalled them overnight. Today, I removed them again and informed her in writing that I object to being recorded. Our state, Maryland, requires consent from both parties for audio recording. She claimed they were set to only record video, not audio. The cameras don't belong to my wife. They belong to a friend of hers. The friend asked me to return them to my spouse, so I did. I'm worried about this situation. I don't want to be recorded, and I fear it might be used against me in some way. Presently, my work setup involves managing tasks from home, while also supervising my first-grade son's remote learning sessions. Negotiating the complexities of divorce and custody arrangements in my state adds an extra layer of challenge. The authorities seem to discourage divorces by making the process intricate. Divorce options boil down to two paths: a contested route requiring a year-long separation period, and an uncontested one necessitating a signed separation agreement, which offers a quicker resolution if both parties are in agreement. However, I find myself in a conundrum. I cannot vacate the premises without establishing a custody arrangement. Fast forward nearly a year into the divorce proceedings, and my ex-partner seems to be dragging out the separation agreement, coupled with unreasonable custody demands and indecision regarding the property. The uncertainty surrounding whether she intends to sell the property or buy me out further exacerbates the situation. The prolonged delay in finalizing the separation agreement has prompted thoughts of initiating a contested divorce. However, even in that scenario, the current COVID situation means the next custody hearing won't take place for another 4 to 5 months. Consequently, I feel trapped, powerless to leave on my own terms while enduring the toxic atmosphere. The financial burden falls solely on my shoulders despite my ex-partner's comparable earning capacity. Enduring constant criticism and derogatory remarks about my efforts and character has left me drained and disillusioned. It's an exhausting cycle, and I feel utterly depleted.